Ah, la résistance. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, there's a big article in New York Times Magazine, but it's not the only place I've seen stuff like this, talking about the resistance to a second term for President Trump, not from the Democratic Party, but from within the Republican Party. Now, we've talked about this idea before. But reading this article and others like it, some thoughts occurred to me that perhaps the president might want to embrace some of this. And I will give you a little context for this. When Governor Tom Corbett, I believe, in Pennsylvania was running for his I know it's Tom Corbett, but I believe it was his second term. There was a challenger, a guy named Sam Rohr, who rose up and got quite a bit of support. And the chairman of the state Republican Party made some comment early in the primaries that we were looking forward to getting together around Governor Corbett and running for re-election. And it may have been his first term, but it really doesn't matter because Sam Rohr's supporters were ticked off. And frankly, many of them stayed away when it came time to elect him. And at the time, I said to Governor Corbett, I had an opportunity to talk to him, and I said, wouldn't you have been better off to say, well, I appreciate the chairman's enthusiasm for my candidacy, but let's see how the primaries go. This is Pennsylvania Republicans' opportunity to choose. Well, here we have a primary season coming up, and in at least New Hampshire and Iowa polling, Bill, some 40% of Republicans said they'd like to at least consider another alternative. On a broad question, don't you think it's salutary to have a vigorous free market of competition and ideas, even within a party?
I'd love to consider another alternative. Wouldn't you?
I'm the guy who asked the questions on this
show. Okay, so that doesn't imply a lack of support. And besides, it's 40%, not 90%. To say that I'd like to consider another alternative is just plain common sense. I mean, to the degree that this story is out there, it makes it sound like there's this uprising when that's not the case at all. I have enormous problems with some of the things that Donald Trump does, mostly personally, but I long ago put those aside because I understand that he is the only person that could have won in 2016, and he's the only person with the ability to destroy this deep state mechanism that we have seen with the Mueller report and the FBI and Comey and Hillary, all the rest of this junk. It's a swamp. I don't know any better swamp drainers out there, but they may arise. For example, if Trey Gowdy were to run for president, I would give him very serious thought, very serious. But as a matter of fact, I'll just tell you clean open right now. It's not going to happen. But if Trey Gowdy were to run for president, I would vote for Trey Gowdy in the primaries. But if it turned out that Donald Trump was the Republican nominee, I would support him enthusiastically. And the bigger issue is not really what's going to happen in the primary, Scott. The big issue is what's going to happen in the general election. And every indication that I can see says that Donald Trump's support is much stronger than it was in 2016. That a number of never-Trumpers have been impressed by his Supreme Court picks, his economic performance, his national security performance. And while they may have personal distaste for the guy, a lot of people who either didn't vote for him Republicans, who either didn't vote for him in 2016 or did so with enormous trepidation, are doing now much more enthusiastically, in large part because of the nature of the witch hunt that's been launched against him. So to say that yes, it'd be nice to have other people in the primaries, I think that's good and healthy. I cannot remember an election where the incumbent did not have a challenger from his own party at some point in the process.
Well, there are a couple of names being bandied about, and I'm sure there are more than these, but lately I've heard of Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, also former Massachusetts Governor William Weld, and nobody thinks that these guys have a broad national support. In fact, Hogan is engaged right now in a multi-state tour to gauge his support around the country. For Weld's part, he's with a lot of Republicans who are basically saying, not so much that I don't like what the administration has accomplished, but it is the exhaustion of the tone, of the constant badgering, of the tweeting, of the, unseemly way that this president has of communicating. Now, on the other hand, Larry Hogan is saying he doesn't like what he read in the Mueller report, and he thinks that there is legitimate cause there for charges of obstruction against the president, that he may have violated the law. So,
let's take those.
Let me just ask this though: on the William Weld argument of can't we have a Republican president who believes these things and is not a pig, essentially? Wouldn't the president be wise to embrace this? Like I wished Tom Corbett would have embraced Sam Rohr's supporters and basically say, you know what? You're right. It is a little bit of rough and tumble world, and I've probably gone over the edge a few times, and we could do a better job of communicating here.
Let's just take the example as you phrased it, because while it's obviously demeaning, I think it's not entirely inaccurate. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a president who believed these things, who wasn't such a pig? Well, first of all, what Donald Trump believes and what the rhinos that have made up the Republican Party for half a century or longer believe, certainly since Reagan and Gingrich's ascendancy, I don't know what they believe. But the much larger issue is, couldn't we have a candidate who's not a pig? And the answer is no, we could not have a candidate who's not a pig. That's the blunt answer to it. And I say that with no, I mean this, I say this with no disrespect to President Trump. I genuinely do. What Donald Trump has shown me and a bunch of other people is that in a world where the Democratic Party and the news media and the pop culture are welded together into one massive bludgeon of elitist people who are not nearly as smart as they think they are, determined to tell the American people who they should vote for. In a world with that kind of headwind, the only person who is capable of not only getting elected but actually accomplishing something when he is elected is somebody who understands exactly how those people work and fights by their rules. So to the degree that Donald Trump may be a pig, he's a pig who was elected in the middle of a pigsty. It's not a terrible surprise. And what Donald Trump does, and the reason he is so hated by the left, is not the uncouth things he says, but the fact that he says them in such a way that he understands. He cuts right through the crap. He's the same as Andrew Breitbart. He's the only person I've seen since Andrew Breitbart who understood that in most of these cases, to engage the question is to lose. It really is, for the larger view of things, the Republican candidate in this kind of a culture is really constantly being asked every single day, at what point did you stop beating your wife, if ever? That's the ocean, that's the atmosphere, that's what's going on, that's what they have to deal with. And so Donald Trump, like Andrew Breitbart, often just refuses to fall into that trap. And a perfect example of this was his recent statement regarding illegal immigrants that had been rounded up by ICE. Saying, well, maybe instead of taking them to the border, maybe we'll just take them to sanctuary cities and let them live there. And what did you hear as a result of this? You heard outrage. People like Cher saying, but we already have enough homeless people in Santa Monica. But you're telling other people that these illegal aliens and criminals should be allowed to live wherever they want to, and they want to live in Santa Monica, Cher, so why don't you live up to your miserable, low-life, virtue-signaling, 80-watt IQ political positions? That is a master stroke of political showmanship that is utterly lacking in anybody else that I've seen in the Republican Party.
I have no illusions that there is a candidate, at least we haven't seen one yet, who has the potential to be able to mount a significant challenge. And frankly, the people who are pushing this kind of thing, people like Evan McMullin, who, I think got 20% of the vote in his home state and 0.54% of the vote across the country when he ran for president. People like William Kristol, formerly of the Standard, I forget what's the whole name of the Weekly Standard, and now part of the Bulwark, which is this sort of Never Trump organization. These people just do not engender confidence in their leadership ability. And even if they were brilliant and had their finger on the pulse of the United States of America, I think that they would utterly fail. But I wonder whether it is useful to the president in his reelection campaign to at least have the Washington Generals out there. Wasn't that the name of the team? To at least have the Washington.
I lost a lot of money betting on the Generals.
For those of you who
the Globetrotters came back from the end. There was a close fight, and then I had a lot of money on the Washington Generals, and the Harlem Globetrotters ended up winning the game after all. So,
but there's value in if only for the president in the entertainment value of it, but it also seems to me to be an opportunity, knowing that there is some portion of the Republican populace out there who does not like what they see in him, as an opportunity to reach out and embrace them.
Okay, so let's look at the situation, some options that the president will have in the primaries this coming election, and also let's compare the primaries of coming election to the primaries of the last election. Let's go backwards first. Donald Trump managed to survive and win not only the nomination but the presidency among a field of 16 Republicans, several of whom I thought had real political ability. Donald Trump wasn't my first choice either. Ted Cruz was my first choice, but there was a lot about the people there. So if you're trying to say basically that in 2020 there's going to be a large group of Republicans that don't want to vote for Trump, they would have wanted to vote for George Bush, their position is weaker in 2020 than it was in 2016. And so once again, he's looking much stronger to me than he did last time. But if it becomes a question of what should he do, and as you well know, he calls me pretty much every day asking for advice on these things. But look, there's two things that Donald Trump could do in terms of facing Republican challengers, both of which he is temperamentally very well suited to do. The first one is, unless something strange happens, he is going to be faced by midgets. The two people you mentioned, I know who Bill Kristol is because of the commentary, but the two people you mentioned, I had no idea who they were. So on some level, if you put Donald Trump on a podium with two other people, and these two other people are absolute mediocrities, all it does is just show Donald Trump has at least the charisma and at least the ability of the crowd to get a response and generate some kind of enthusiasm. So it would be to his advantage to be seen on stage with these political midgets. But I think a very smart strategy, and actually when I was thinking of it, Scott, when you asked the question, I could hear Donald Trump saying it. It was such a great idea. Let's say that he's in a debate, and let's say that a Republican challenger comes up with something really terrific. He's got a really superb talking point. Donald Trump ought to look at him and say, that is a great idea. I'm going to use that idea. In fact, after the election, I may hire you as secretary of this or that. And where do you go? Where do you go after that? Right? They say, he stole this guy's idea. He admitted on national television he's stealing his idea. This kind of thing is brilliant, and this is the kind of thing that Donald Trump excels at. He excels at it, Scott, to get back to the point of the issue. This whole argument of wouldn't it be nice if we had a guy who believed these things who wasn't a pig. In a way, it's a self-defeating question, because it is much like, how many times have you spent your time scratching your head over which would prevail, the irresistible force or the immovable object, when in fact the question is a complete oxymoron. The question is invalid. The existence of an immovable object means that there is no irresistible force. The existence of an irresistible force means there's no such thing as an immovable object. The question doesn't make any sense, shouldn't even be asked. But when you say, well, gee, do we have to have a president who's kind of boorish about this, and to put it in the language that we hear so often from the left, do we have to have or Republican challengers, do we have to have a president who's such a pig? And the question is, in the same way, a non-logical question. This is the only president, this is the only kind of person who could be president of the Republican Party in this toxic environment. To assume that somebody of tremendous upright moral character, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, let's say, a man of courage who was a lecturer at Brandeis University and a Civil War hero, may have saved the entire Union. Take somebody magnificent like that, magnificent, not just physically brave, but intellectually brave and intellectually fearless and all the rest of it. Take somebody like that. You take a man like that with those kind of moral qualities and you throw them into this mud pit that, lucky if it's just mud, that modern politics has become because of this media and pop culture collusion and all of the lies that presumably formerly credible sources like CBS News and CNN and the New York Times. You throw a person like that into that mix, and they will either fail spectacularly, but more likely they will withdraw, and even more likely than that, they will not enter the race in the first place. I have no doubt whatsoever. I know at least 3 or 4 people who I think would make a far better president than Donald Trump. But they're not going to be president because they're not going to run. And they're not going to run because the process of running for president has become so destructive and so filthy. Just ask Brett Kavanaugh about what public office treats are in store for you. The people like that, they simply won't run. And so an ideal president who doesn't get elected is how we got ourselves into this mess in the first place. I'm just grateful that Donald Trump has the ability to use the pop culture in a way that the left uses the pop culture, and it drives them mad. And as I said, I didn't even realize I'd predicted this, and I don't want to gloat about it too much, but I'll gloat just a little. 4 days after Romney was defeated in 2012, I said the next president's going to be a Republican. He's going to come from the pop culture. And he's going to come from the pop culture because the ability to be facile on television, the ability to respond to an attack on the level at which it's given you, is what it would take. And lo and behold, here he is. So, to the degree that he's not a nice man, he's not a nice man. And despite whatever personal opinions you may have about him and his sense of taste or decorum or whatever, I think one thing that's pretty clear from his actions is he doesn't like America getting raped on economic deals that just do nothing but simply send our jobs overseas. And he doesn't like an American military that's too weak to stand up to savages like ISIS and so on. And he doesn't like a Supreme Court that legislates from the bench. And those 3 things are more than enough for me and more than enough for anyone else. So good luck with the challenge. I am unaware of anybody on the conservative side of the fence. I genuinely cannot think of a living soul who has the charisma to pull that off, with the possible exception of Clint Eastwood.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do have a pallet in my garage filled with Tim Allen / Tim Tebow bumper stickers from 2016 that I guess I can sell on eBay.
I would have voted for them both in a heartbeat.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are.
I was just going to say, just to add more hot gas to this already made point. But if it had been Tim and Tim in 2016, the only chance that they would have had would have been Tim Allen. Tim Tebow, I'm a Florida Gator, so I love Tim Tebow. But Tim Allen would have been the only chance that we would have had to win that, because Tim Allen is funny, and Tim Allen is not afraid to get his fingers scuffed a little bit, and he knows how to throw a jolt back. He knows how to deal with hecklers, and the news media is just the world's largest collection of hecklers.
Well, while across the country speech codes and protests are shutting down speech that disagrees with the popular zeitgeist, here at BillWhittle.com, we actually show our ideological opponents the courtesy of dignifying their argument with an answer. And we do that 5 days a week. The folks at BillWhittle.com who have become members there make this possible. They actually fund this activity, and not only they fund it, but they enjoy it. So they get to see some 44 new shows every month. They participate in a member-written blog where they're literally citizen producers writing this content, and they communicate with each other in a variety of other ways on that member-exclusive website. We invite you to join that website, join Team Liberty, by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making it happen.